All right. Namaste to everybody. We are so thankful that we get an opportunity to do this. What an amazing time in which we live. There's so much beautiful stuff that is manifesting that has been hidden to us and from us for so long. And you truly you truly have gotten to live in a time that people have talked about literally for thousands of years. And so the movement, the progression, the evolution of spirit is of our spirits is continuing on at a really really fast pace, and uh, it's quite amazing to see the two distinctions between uh, the frequencies that are coming, that are being manifested. And so peace to you guys. I hope you're blessed. I've enjoyed the conversations I've had this week. Amazing. And I hope you guys have enjoyed the truths that were imparted in that. And so we're going to pick back up tonight. We're back in Isis Unveiled. And so there's really a lot of beautiful things she's bringing clarity to people that will listen and give heed and pay attention. And of course, that's always our focus is very 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 important in the time in which we live. So we saw last week that there were cycles that were laid out that have been functioning forever. Uh, it's almost like multiple times weekly we find something comes into our timelines that is just mind-boggling about new ancient things that they're finding, and of course DNA is a big part of that. Uh, there's been much done on the positive note, which is really one of the places where we stand on a precipice. Just so that you know, the one of the precipices that humanity is standing on is going to be whether we can keep it together and whether we can use AI, which was a technology that was given to us by star people, and you don't need to guess if that's true or not. It is. It will inevitably, and already does it in different ways, have a form of consciousness about it. And so what's gonna happen is it's really going to be based off of us and the frequency of humanity as a whole as to how this goes, whether continues to be used for a positive purpose, or whether some would say when AI gets converted and morphs over into something that is actually used by mankind negatively. But I think that principle is not so hard for us to discover. I mean, we sit here today and we have Social Security, and we have Medicaid, we have Medicare, we have all of these things that are meant for the betterment of people, and yet it's really been quite amazing how much money has been stolen from the American people through those things that were meant to bring blessing. So, in fact, there's been so much money siphoned off that now we don't even have enough money and I'm not talking about the shutdown. There's another spiritual significance of that, which is part of the division of the earth. The precipice there is that is mankind going to figure out how to come together and work together, or will we continue to divide? And that means that the right gets farther right and the left gets farther left, and that is the division in humanity. And right now, I have to say it's not looking all that impressive, to be honest with you. But however it works out, it's not lost. It's not going to stop everyone. In fact, we are in a cycle, which we're going to see some of again, but we are in a cycle of the earth purging itself. So it goes back to the principles that we've talked about in the past of there is always a constant regeneration and death, regeneration and death, regeneration and death. And that cycle never ceases. It happens here, It happens in the heavenlies. We have planets that, go away. We have things that come in. We have, just constantly. Uh, and I think that there may be a little side note there. I personally believe that the reason that we have the tides to do with the oceans is to remind us of that constant flow and ebb, you know. That is the cycle of humanity. It always has been. We grow really high. We seem to find enlightenment, and then what happens? We descend. And so, actually, she kind of talks about some of this tonight. So, I'm going to move on, and we'll get on with that. But I hope you guys are blessed, and not only that, I really hope that you're maybe starting to awaken. The picture and the purpose for all of this is certainly, for me, for a human, has been kind of difficult to make the switch from all of the paradigms that we believed for 60 years, and how do you get rid of all of that stuff. And talking to a brother this week, he said, well, you use that metaphor all the time about we need to bleed the Christian out of us. And that is very true, though it is a metaphor. Please don't anybody cut theirself because I said that. But I wanted to say this. It's not just Christianity that we need to bleed out of us. There are all kinds of things. The ego is a wonderful thing, and yet it's a horrible thing. And so there's always duality. For every good, there's a bad, and for every right, there's a wrong. And so let's pick up and go here. I'm on page 25. I'm going to pick up, I believe, where we left off last week, which was beautiful. I hope you are starting to get a little bit of the pieces, as you can tell. And this is one of about 25 books that she wrote, that every word in them is beneficial to us. And I intend to continue on no matter what, but I hope that you'll be blessed too. And so she says, the revolution of the physical world, according to the ancient doctrine, is attended by a like revolution in the world of intellect. The spiritual evolution of the world preceding in cycles like the physical one. And so we're in one of those physical cycles, those spiritual cycles now. And there are many things going on, but there are people awakening. Something is happening in the remembering of our consciousness. Remembering of our consciousness. It was really quite earth-shattering when I learned that all of these people are out there trying to get people to do things, and if you do those things, then somehow you will become something, okay? And that really is, it's almost kind of like the old Christian argument about, are you saved by grace or saved by works? It really is kind of like that, and they are as far left about their belief system as about anything that there is, and so when you come to the understanding, when we all come to the understanding that what really is going on is that we get to live in a time when the veil is starting to be thinned, and the more that veil is thinned, the more that our consciousness, that we are consciousness, is evolving. That is the remembering. When we get to the point finally where we remember that we really are the all, that the all is our divine spark, then it's going to be really, this world's going to be a beautiful place. If I hope we get there. My belief is that we will. This is not a gloom and doom thing. Piece I wanted to share for all the guys that are hung up and live their lives under the Christian doctrine. The whole cosmic concept of all of those things seem to be at many levels about an ending. And yet, if you will get outside of Christianity and the Bible, and that doesn't mean, because you probably I see more principles in the Bible that were correct, both Paul and Yeshua mainly, but if you can get it outside of that concept, which is the picture of gloom and doom in the end, and if we can begin to understand that all of the ancients, the Olmecs, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Sumerians, the Chaldeans, Lemurians, and just for those of you that may not know about this Lemuria, there actually now is starting to come to the forefront not only proof that there was an Atlantis, but there is also proof that there was a Lemuria who was a perfect society that existed before it. There are some documentations of those things. And just because we don't know them isn't surprising. We didn't know anything except keep you in that trap for the rest of your life. The rest of your, let me say it like this in the squirrel cage, lives. So, anyways, thus we see in history a regular alternation of ebb and flow in the tide of human progress. The great kingdoms and the empires of they do what's right, they work, they love people, they're not racist, but you have to admit now it's back. Okay, could you not hear it? All right, we obviously have some kind of a technical difficulty. That was working and now it appears not to be. Okay. All right. Well, our internet has not been wanting to be, the interweb has not been wanting to be kind to us. And so, thus we see in history a regular alternation of ebb and flow in the tide of human progress. The great kingdoms and empires of the world, after reaching the culmination of their greatness, they descend again, in accordance with the same law by which they ascended. Till, having reached the lowest point, humanity reasserts itself and mounts up once more, the height of its attainment being by this law of ascending progression by cycles somewhat higher than the point from which it had been before had descended. And so I'm not real sure if that piece, and she seems apprehensive here, you almost get the feel that it's the same thing at one level that they also say about humans, that every time that you come back in and you're reincarnated, you're a little bit more evolved than you were the life before. There are certainly people that would argue that is part of the lie, the manipulation. Oh, if you'll just keep going long enough, eventually you'll get yourself free. Because the truth is as long as you stay in that trap, you won't be free. And so, the division of the history of mankind into golden, silver, copper, and iron ages is not a fiction. We see the same thing in the literature of peoples. An age of great inspiration and unconscious productiveness is invariably followed by an age of criticism and consciousness. The one affords material for the analyzing and critical intellect of the other. Thus, all those great characters who tower like giants in the history of mankind, like Buddha, Siddhartha, and Jesus in the realm of spiritual, and Alexander the Macedonian and Napoleon the Great in the realm of physical conquest, were but reflex images of human types which had existed 10,000 years before. In the preceding decimillennium, reproduced by the mysterious powers controlling the destinies of our world. There is no prominent character in all of the annals of sacred or profane history whose prototype we cannot find in the half-fictitious and half-real traditions of bygone religions and mythologies. As the star, glimmering at an immeasurable distance above our heads in the boundless immensity of the sky, reflects itself in the smooth waters of a lake, so does the imagery of men of the antediluvian ages reflect itself in the periods we can embrace in a historical retrospect. As above, so it is below. That which has been will return again. We need to remember that. So when you hear these things, and maybe you question, maybe your mind can't grab around this, how could it be that in reality, how could they have been so much more advanced than us, and yet seemingly they had not had the time to progress? It's a good question. I think it's a fair question to ask. And so, the reflections of these things are circulatory. That seems so weird to us because we're so fixed, we're so finite, right? You've been programmed your whole life to believe that it's appointed unto every man once to die, and then the judgment. And that's the end of the finiteness. You die, and you either go suffer or you go to extreme happiness. And then, so when all of this stuff starts coming in, that we're eternal no matter what happens to our body, that's a little bit hard to swallow, I'm sure, for some. And so, there is no prominent character in all the annals of sacred or profane history whose prototype we cannot find in the half-fictitious, half-real traditions of bygone religions and mythologies. As the star glimmering at an immeasurable distance above our heads in the boundless immensity of the sky reflects itself in the smooth waters of a lake, so does the imagery of men of the antediluvian ages reflect itself in the periods we can embrace in an historical retrospect. As above, so it is below. That which has been will return again. As in heaven, so on earth. All the same principle. The world is always ungrateful to its great men. Now, I very much appreciate, because she really has helped me, because there's so much teaching about how things are, and the one thing that I love about Helena is that she is her true self. She doesn't shift herself to meet somebody else's narrative. She is writing the narrative. And she doesn't think twice, just like Yeshua was a kind-hearted, sweet, loving guy. But if you say that his in the temple and him turning the tables and stuff over, if you say that anger is sin, then the one who came, who's the only perfect human, then he was a sinner. We need to be honest and fair. I used to wonder about that. Well, why is it okay for Jesus to whip the fire out of somebody, but it ain't okay for people to whip their children? And so, the world is always ungrateful to its great men. Florence has built a statue to Galileo, but hardly even mentions Pythagoras. The former had a ready guide in the treatises of, Copernicus, who had been obligated to contend against the universally established Ptolemaic system. But neither Galileo nor modern astronomy discovered the emplacement of the planetary bodies. Thousands of ages before, it was taught by the sages of Middle Asia and brought thence by Pythagoras, not as a speculation, but as a demonstrated science. The numerals of Pythagoras, says Porphyry, were hieroglyphical symbols, by means whereof he explained all ideas concerning the nature of all things. Verily, then, to antiquity alone have we to look for the origin of all things. How will Hargrave Jennings expresses himself when speaking of pyramids, and how true are his words when he asks, is it at all reasonable to conclude at a period when knowledge was at the highest, and when the human powers were in comparison with ours at the present time, prodigious, that all these indomitable, scarcely believable physical effects, that such achievements are those of the Egyptians, were devoted to a mistake? So how could they have accomplished this and everything that they did was a mistake? That the myriads of the Nile were fools, laboring in the dark, and that all the magic of their great men were forgery, and that we, despising that which we call their superstition and wasted power, are alone the wise. No, there is much more to these old religions than probably in the audacity of modern denial, in the confidence of these superficial science times, and in the derision of these days without faith, is in the least degree supposed. We do not understand the old time. Thus, we see how classic practice and heathen teaching may be made to reconcile. How even the Gentile and the Hebrew, the mythological and Christian doctrine harmonize in the general faith founded on magic. That magic is indeed possible is the moral of this book. In fact, it's really sad when you contemplate the reality of those things that Jesus said, like he expected us to be doing magic. Now, I know they wouldn't tell you that in Christianity. They made all the, how much time did Yahweh, the false God, or the writers of the Bible, how much time did they spend defaming the Egyptians? Do you know why they defamed the Egyptians and the people had to come out of Egypt and they had to destroy Egypt and Egypt was so bad? All of that was done because when a new God comes on the scene, the new God has to remove the face of the old God. Go look at history. It's all over the place. And that's all they were doing, dear one. There's not a thing. I'm not saying that there aren't people who work black arts. But true, pure spiritual magic is anything but black arts. In fact, true spiritual magic is the magic of love. That love actually does have power. When Yeshua came, he didn't come and cast some demonic curse on somebody to heal them of leprosy. He came and he simply extended love to them, and love created magic. And if we can see that, then all of a sudden we can come to terms and be at peace with Yeshua and what he did as not being a Christian. Because I know many people have this picture that somehow if Jesus came to the earth today and manifested, he would be so happy to get up on sun worship morning and go to church. And I'm sad to tell you, I think that might not happen. So, it is possible 30 years ago, when the first rappings of Rochester awakened slumbering attention to the reality of an invisible world, when the gentle shower of raps gradually becoming a torrent which overflowed the whole globe, spiritualists had to contend but against two potencies: theology and science, religion and science. But the theosophists have, in addition to these, to meet the world at large, and the spiritualists first of all. There is a personal God and there is a personal devil, thunders the Christian preacher. Let him be anathema who dares say nay. There is no personal God except the gray matter that's in your brain. Contemptuously replies the materialist, and there is no devil. Let him be considered thrice an idiot who says all. Meanwhile, the occultists and true philosophers heed neither of these two combatants, but they keep perseveringly at their work. None of them believe in the absurd, passionate, and fickle God of superstition, but all of them believe in good and evil. Our human reason, the emanation of our finite mind, is certainly incapable of comprehending a divine intelligence, an endless and infinite entity, and according to strict logic, that which transcends our understanding and would remain thoroughly incomprehensible to our senses cannot exist for us. We simply can't allow it to, because we can't make any sense. Well, what does the Bible tell you about that? That God is not a man that he should lie, neither the Son of Man that he repent. If he says it, will he not do it? So that establishes that his word, his logos, is the creative force. And then on top of that, it even goes further and tell us that God is not his thoughts are not our thoughts, and his ways are not our ways, and his ways are so much higher than our ways could ever be, which is also telling you, in reality, there's no way for you to ever really know who God is. We know him experientially. We know him through intuition, which is really the main guiding force as we go along here that is going to begin. As it doesn't mean that people don't have wrong intuitions. It doesn't mean that people don't listen to their mind. It simply tells us that at a point that will shift, if you would. So we have to be very careful about perceiving all of these things to be so fixed as we were, you know. In religion, your grandma probably believed what you believed, and you believe it, and your mom and dad believed it, and your kids will believe it, and their kids will believe it, and it's just nothing ever changes. And that saying, there really is nothing new under the sun, because you keep getting taught the same thing. And so none of them believe in the absurd, passionate, and fickle God of superstition, but all of them believe in good and evil. Our human reason, the emanation of our finite mind, is certainly incapable of comprehending a divine intelligence. I was talking to somebody and I said to them, I said, would it really surprise you so much if you came to a place of enlightenment, you broke through the shells, and you began to truly inside of you know and become that which you already are, and you were going one direction and you wanted to go somewhere else, and you simply thought of that, and because your thought is creative and your words are creative, you moved into that reality instantaneously. Well, you may not think that can happen, but I would like to show you in the Bible how there was one known who was not at the time one of necessarily the disciples in that concept of the first ones, But here he comes, his name is Philip, and he meets with someone who's traveling, and he tells them of the power of the prophet of Isaiah, and instantaneously he is taken from one place. Instantaneous. Now that's in the Bible. And if you look at that in all honesty outside and you don't put the religious guise on it that it's somehow prophecy or powerful because it's Christian, and you begin to see he simply in his mind knew that he needed to go to another town, and he thought of that town, and by thinking of that town, his timeline shifted and put him in that town. You find it. He ends up over here at another town the next thing that happens. So here's what I'm saying to you. There are pictures for us if we would open our eyes and begin to believe. There are pictures of us of the things that I talk about that we should expect to see before this earth makes its next evolutionary change of that sort. And in ways they already are happening. People are healing. Being around other people's light. People are being drawn to the light, to aura, to, there are shifts that are going on. And if you open your eyes, you actually can pick those things up out of strangers just walking through a Walmart or walking over here go in a grocery store and stand and just open your mind and look at all the people that come in and function. And you should begin to be able to read the thoughts. Well, we see Yeshua doing this. It was a form of functioning telepathy. Yeshua could read what their mind was. Oftentimes, he only asked questions because he already knew what they were thinking. You hear statements like, well, it's what you're thinking of. In fact, he told Thomas a week or two ago when we read, he said, Thomas, that's the question you have already. I mean, I'm just going to tell you the question before you ask it. But that's who we are supposed to be. So I hope that you guys will understand this is not a bad luck story. No matter, there's going to be bad stuff. But we also have protections that the archons and the powers that are functioning in the spirit realm will not be able to get a hold of us if we will do the part of unveiling the frequency. So here you go. The monad gave and gives people frequency when they come into this earth. You had a fixed frequency, and this is a truth that I learned, and it kind of caused me months of consternation because I'm listening to all of these channelers and all of these teachers talk about somehow it's like you've got to go do enough work so that you can change your frequency. And the truth is you can't change your frequency. So we need to then pay attention to what the heck's going on. Because the truth of the matter is that if we are divine consciousness, friends, we already are vibrating at the frequency. What we have to do is get self out of the way. Once again, back to John's words. Just so you know, John's words on the River Jordan of I must cease to exist so that I can begin to exist, if you would, from physical to spirit. And so, for us, our human reason, the emanation of our finite mind, is certainly incapable of comprehending a divine intelligence, an endless and infinite entity, and according to strict logic, that which transcends our understandings and would remain thoroughly incomprehensible to our senses cannot exist for us. Hence, it does not exist. It's not because it's not real. It's not because it's not there. Okay? It's because your mind can't deal with it. So we don't focus. We don't give it a contemplation. We don't pay attention to it. We say, well, that's not important. It's not important for me to breathe some kind of special way. It's not important for me to do these things. Why? Because your mind can't imagine that you focusing on your breathing in any shape, form, or fashion, how that could possibly help you have a better life. And so you don't do it because you don't believe it. So anybody who's struggling with that, it's okay if that is the reality, but that may not be the most beneficial perspective to have if I could. Maybe we should think about a different perspective, and that might help us to recognize that we're all in tune. If the ocean has to go in and out, your lungs, why do your lungs go in and out? Has it ever considered to you that all of these things, if you look at them and how they function, and you look around at everything, you start seeing that everywhere? It's going on in you. If you cease to breathe, if you cease to have an ebb and flow, if you cease to have a high tide and a low tide, you know what happens, right? Your body's dead. It has to have a flow of fresh oxygen. And the way we have fresh oxygen is for it to go out and for it to come in. So for us to be naive enough to think that breath work has no value is really just a detriment to yourself. This isn't to make you, it's not a sin. This isn't about you going to hell because you're not doing something. This is about you impeding your journey, your explanation. If you choose not to do it, dear one, it's okay. Just don't do it. But understand that there is a response that echoes back from the universe for every decision that we make like that. That's a form of karma. And so far as infinite reason agrees with science and says there is no God. But on the other hand, our ego, that which lives and thinks and feels independently of us in our mortal casket. And I hope that you will get that about your ego. Your ego is almost another being. It does whatever it wants to. It always serves its own interest. And it is a part of you, but it's not a part of you. It's a part that you've let become of you. It's not your true, authentic self. Ego cannot be in the spirit realm, dear one. It's one of the most destructive forces to humans that they are, that you need to be seen. You need somebody to tell you how good you are. You need somebody to give you pleasure by messing up with the dopamine in your head because they gave you a compliment to manipulate you. And it goes on all the time. It's everywhere, all the time. And so, on the other hand, our ego, so get that which lives and thinks and feels independently of us in our mortal casket does more than believe. It knows that there exists a God in nature. For the soul, an invincible artificer of all lives in us as we live in him. No dogmatic faith or exact science is able to uproot that intuitional feeling inherent in man when he has once fully realized it in himself. And there is a merger to the remembering that's going on. That is the remembering. When you remember that that is who you are. It really does take over a lot of the places that we struggle so hard about. And we do struggle, it's okay. Human nature is like universal nature in its abhorrence of a vacuum. It feels an intuitional yearning for a supreme nature, supreme power without a God. The cosmos would seem to it but like a soulless corpse. Being forbidden to search for him where alone his traces would be found. Man, filling the aching void with the personal God whom his spiritual teachers built up for him from the crumbling ruins of heathen myths and hoary philosophies of old. How otherwise explain the mushroom growth of new sects, some of them absurd beyond degree? Mankind has one innate, irrepressible craving that must be satisfied in any religion that would supplant the dogmatic, undemonstrated, and undemonstratable theology of our Christian ages. This is the yearning after the proofs of immortality. As Sir Thomas Browne has expressed it, it is the heaviest stone that melancholy can throw at a man, to tell him that he is at the end of his nature and that there is no future state to come, unto which this seems progressively and otherwise made in vain. And so here's the picture. All of you that are still struggling about the book of Revelation and the destruction that's coming, I hate to tell you something, friends. What's next after this age is a rebirthing. All of the stuff that was originally written in the Bible about what you believe to be the end of the eon, which is a term most people don't even know what Yeshua meant when he said that, but it's certainly not the end of the age, which is what I was told, and that was supposed to be deep understanding. Oh, he's talking about the end of the age. Well, I've already shown you guys, if you have any memory of it, that the eons are not the end of the age. Eons are part of creation. And so Yeshua is saying something completely different than what we brainwashed to believe. And in reality, what we're waiting for is not the destruction of humanity. Inevitably, what we are going to get to witness is the rebirth of humanity. And so I understand it's believed that this will be one of the ages where we actually become the true perfect human, like Yeshua was. So what does that tell you then about what we're looking for in this future? What is the future supposed to look like? Well, if the future looks like what Yeshua was, then that means that we all love and care about each other, and there is no war and there is no animosity. You know, even Barack Obama stood up and made fun of the Christian Bible because, you know, well, where is that one where Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself? You can't have that in this realm. But this isn't the realm that's going to exist forever. That's the thing, unfortunately, Mr. Obama doesn't recognize, is that there is a shift that's going on, and that's not what humanity is going to look like here in the very near future. We're going to be people that once again love each other. We're going to be people that quit all of this nonsense competition and all of the other things that go with humanity and ego. That's what this whole shift is about. Isn't destruction or the end of humanity. It is actually the rebirthing of humanity. And certainly a lot of ancients prophesied that. And so without a God, a cosmos would seem but a soulless corpse. So it seems like to me that all humans, whether they believe in God or don't believe in God, have a need for a God. I think we all instinctively, I suspect that that's the divine in us that's never going to let go of that concept. Even atheists cry out, oh God. Well, why'd you cry out, oh God, if there ain't one, right? And so we don't really like it, but it does seem to be true nonetheless. So how otherwise explain the mushroom growth of new sects, some of them absurd beyond degree? Mankind has one innate, irrepressible craving that must be satisfied in any religion that would supplant the dogmatic, undemonstrated proofs of immortality. As Sir Thomas Browne has expressed it, it is the heaviest stone that melancholy can throw at a man to tell him that he is at the end of his and otherwise made in vain. Which really, if you think about it, that is a stone that has been thrown at us. What are we all waiting for? We're waiting for the end. And it doesn't do anything for raising your frequency. In fact, at best, it lowers your frequency. And so let any religion offer itself that can supply these proofs in the shape of scientific facts, and the established system will be driven to the alternative of fortifying its dogma with such facts or passing out of the reverence and affection of Christendom. Many a Christian divine has been forced to acknowledge that there is no authentic source whence the assurance of a future state could have been derived by man. How could then such a belief have stood for countless ages were it not that among all nations, whether civilized or savage, man has been allowed the demonstrative proof. Is not the very existence of such a belief an evidence that thinking philosopher and unreasoning savage have been both compelled to acknowledge the testimony of their senses? That if in isolated instances spectral illusion may have been resulted from physical causes, on the other hand, in thousands of instances, apparitions of persons have held converse with several individuals at once who saw and heard them collectively, and could not all have been diseased in the mind. So it's not fake, although that's what we're pretty much taught, right? That's what you suppressed when your children were telling you about spiritual things. What did we do? Suppress them. Well, that's a fake man. It'll go away. Whatever. And many times it's caused the people in the family much harm, not having the knowledge of what's going on, and certainly it messes the child's life up. And so the greatest thinkers of Greece and Rome regarded such matters as demonstrated facts. They distinguished the apparitions by the names of manes and anima and umbra, and the manes descending after the decease of the individual into the underworld, the anima or pure spirit ascending to heaven, and the restless umbra, the earthbound spirit, hovering about its tomb, because the attraction of matter and love of its earthly body prevailed in it and prevented its ascension to higher regions. So you see now the three parts that are existent in us. And some of you may have encountered spiritual forces after someone that you love has died. Sometimes they need to make a peace, and then they can release and go on. And as we see through the work of the mediums and stuff, we see those spirits that have locked themselves here and will never leave. Some of them won't go out of a house because that's still their house after they've been dead for 300 years. And so, hovering above its tomb, because the attraction of matter and love of its earthly body prevailed in it and prevented its ascension to higher regions. And so I would like for you to see that. The pride and the ego that we have is very detrimental, because it only functions in the physical realm. You see these things, they're standing there pining over their body that was lost. They're standing there pining all material things. And so that person was very materialistic while they were here on earth. And so terra legit, carnum, tumulum, circumvolet, umbra, and I'll be honest with you, I meant to have that defined for you, but I didn't. Somebody who knows Latin knows what that means, but I don't. But we'll get an idea here very quickly. Orcus habet manes spiritus astra petit, says Ovid, speaking of the threefold constituents of souls. But all such definitions must be subjected to careful analysis of philosophy. Too many of our thinkers do not consider that the numerous changes in language, the allegorical phraseology, and the evident secretiveness of old mystic writers, who were generally under an obligation never to divulge the solemn secrets of the sanctuary, might have sadly misled translators and commentators. The phrases of the medieval alchemists they read literally, and even the veiled symbology of Plato is commonly misunderstood by the modern scholar. One day they might learn to know better, and so become aware that the method of extreme necessarianism was practiced in ancient as well as in modern philosophy, that from the first ages of man, the fundamental truths of all that we are permitted to know on earth was in the safekeeping of the adepts of the sanctuary, that the difference in creeds and religious practice was only external, and that those guardians of the primitive divine revelation, who had solved every problem that is within the grasp of human intellect, were bound together by a universal freemasonry of science and philosophy, which formed one unbroken chain around the globe. It is for philology and psychology to find the end of the thread. That done, it will then be ascertained that by relaxing one single loop of the old religious system, the chain of mystery may be detangled. The neglect and withholding of these proofs have driven much eminent minds as Hare and Wallace and other men of power into the fold of modern spiritualism. At the same time, it has forced others congenitally devoid of spiritual intuitions into a gross materialism that figures under various names. But we see no utility in persecuting the subject further, for though in the opinion of most of our commentaries there have been but one day of learning in whose twilight stood the older philosophers, and whose noontide brightness is all our own, and though the testimony of scores of ancient and medieval thinkers has proved valueless to modern experimenters, as though the world dated from AD 1 and all knowledge were of recent growth, we will not lose hope or courage. The moment is more opportune than ever for the review of the old philosophies. What the Bible said was to go and dig up the ancient paths. Just so you know it, that wasn't some Christian thing that Jeremiah was talking about. He was giving us the pattern by which we find truth, because the truth exists in this situation behind us, not in front of us. And so what an amazing concept. Can you see that in maybe the way that you viewed things because of what Christianity has told us? We don't really, I really never saw or never heard anybody that promoted someone to get outside. In fact, what I heard is people being condemned if they dared to read something that wasn't in the Bible. You come to church, don't tell your pastor that you read a New Age book, because you and him won't be happy with each other very long. Why? Because you might learn something and share that, and you could cause him untold problems with him trying, as they say, in pastor lingo, you got to fix what somebody else said. And so that usually means a lot of doublespeak to hide it. What an amazing concept all the way around. So, the moment is more opportune than ever for the review of old philosophies. Archaeologists, philologists, astronomers, chemists, physicists are getting nearer and nearer and nearer to the point where they will be forced to consider them. Physical science has already reached its limits of exploration. Dogmatic theology sees the springs of its inspiration dry, and unless we mistake the signs, the day is approaching when the world will receive the proofs that only ancient religions were in harmony with nature, and ancient science embraced all that can be known. Secrets long may be revealed, books long forgotten, and arts long time lost may be brought out to light again. Papyri and parchments of inestimable importance will turn up in the hands of men who pretend to have unrolled them from mummies and stumbled upon them in buried crypts and tablets and pillars and caves and jars, whose sculptured revelations will stagger theologians and confound scientists, may yet be excavated and interpreted. And we know that's true because at this point the Dead Sea Scrolls had neither been found nor had the Nag Hammadi text while she was alive, even though she knew the teachings of the Gnostics. And you have to ask yourself, how in the 1800s, 60 years before the Nag Hammadi texts were found, how did she know all of those texts? You have to ask yourself. You should anyway. And so, who knows the possible of the future? An era of disenchantment and rebuilding will soon begin. Nay, has already begun. The cycle has almost run its course. A new one is about to begin, and the future pages of history may contain full evidence and contain full proof that if ancestry can be in aught believed, descending spirits have conversed with man and told him the secrets of the world unknown. How amazing, huh? Well, we truly are blessed, friends. I hope that you see that puts us to the end of chapter 1. We made it through, yay. I don't know about you guys, man, but this stuff here is just absolutely soul food. Uh, when you begin to see that how critical it is in the time that we're living in, because now it's not Helena telling us that this is going to happen in our society. We now get to look and see it happening in our society. And so I hope that you guys will take this one thought to heed. There are many, many, many different teachings and ways where we are told about the destructive value of fear. It is, without any question, one of the greatest tools that every force, every parasite against us would use is fear. It is a frequency effector. And so I said something a while ago that you have a natural frequency, and I don't believe that you actually get to change that natural frequency. I think what you do is you put another frequency in front of that one. It's as if, just as with people that don't hear the Holy Spirit, you know, if you find somebody and they don't hear the Holy Spirit, there's no need to worry about that, because you, as an initiate, as somebody who is following a disciple, should know that the Holy Spirit is always speaking. The problem is the Holy Spirit speaking. The problem that we might need to examine would be, why am I not listening? And so many, many people don't understand that there can be three things going on in your head, and you got to discern what of those are real and what's not. I've had many situations where there would be messages that came through, and I had to chalk that message off. Something didn't resonate properly, and I went, that sounds good, but I don't believe that was from source. I believe that was from a parasite. And of course, if you don't know that there are cords that are connected to you, and you don't know that you're a drain vein for archons, and and most people probably don't know most of that stuff, and that it's up to you to take responsibility for cutting those cords loose from you. And you do that once again through breath work, through meditation. Sometimes it's not so much that it takes all your day to just sit for 8 hours with your legs in the lotus position and not move or say a word. You'll find as we go along, Helena had some of her greatest spiritual, and I'm starting to hear it everywhere, so I know that Source is bringing this. But friends, silence is everything. You, quite honestly, that's why when you're around and you constantly hear distraction, and you constantly hear people that are making noise that just can't be quiet, as you go along, you're going to find that is harder and harder to deal with, because we just don't understand why all of these ancient mystics, be it Elijah, be it Yeshua, be it the Apostle Paul. Why did Paul go spend 3 years up in the mountain in the cave of Elijah? Why did he spend 3 years on a mountain in the desert by himself? Because silence is everything. In fact, until you learn to be silent, you can never know intimately yourself in the Creator. And so it's not a force thing. It is a choice thing. And some people will choose to do whatever it takes to get that environment around them, and others will simply choose to not. Very, 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 very potent thing I just said, more than we have a concept of, but I assure you, as we go along, you will get a concept. So, blessings to each and every one of you guys. Thank you for all you guys who help me to keep doing this. I know it's not mainstream, and I'm not trying to sell you a bunch of smoke and mirrors, and I'm not trying to sell you some kind of academy. I believe that there has always been men of light. I believe my direction has been guided by a higher source. And so I will continue to do no matter what anybody else does. And so I hope that you guys are learning something, and not just head knowledge, but that some of it is coming out in your life and you begin to see yourself in a different state. It's when you begin to notice that you have really changed, and I've been around enough people to know that there are people who are recognizing. Everybody can see it, but it's when you begin to notice it, because just as with your ego, remember, everybody can see it but you. And so it's the exact same way with the other side. Everybody can see it, and you typically are the last person that sees the changes, if you truly are changing. And so blessings to you guys. I hope you recognize your change as we zoom on through into yet again another phase of spiritual things going on. So I understand 2026 is going to be a mother of a year. So I hope you guys will do all that you can do to prepare yourself and peel some of the onion back, where some of the greatness of who you are will come out, and it will certainly help promote you through it all. So once again, be strong and of a good courage. Namaste.